I had no choice but to sue my own parents while I was in a coma. I, Sarah, 32, have always considered myself a self-made person. It's not like I was born with a silver spoon. My parents, Martha and Robert, always favored my older sister, Olivia. She's 35, and she is their eternal project. Constant problems with credit, foolish business ideas that failed, and, as a result, endless debt. Olivia is a person who always takes but never gives back. And me? I just worked. For 20 years I saved up for my own place, denied myself everything so as not to be a burden on my parents, to be, as they called it, independent. That was always their favorite word for me. Somehow it sounded less like praise and more like a detachment. When I turned 28, I finally bought it. My house. Not a luxury mansion, but a small tidy house on the outskirts of the city. It had a little land where I wanted to plant a garden. I registered all the documents solely in my name. Not because I didn't trust them, but because it was the only serious thing I had created myself. I remember the day I brought my parents to show them the keys. My father nodded, said, "Good job, Sarah. Now you're responsible for yourself." And my mother immediately asked if I could lend Olivia some money to close another loan. At that moment I first felt that for them, my successes were not a source of pride, but just an extra resource for saving Olivia. The last year before what happened was particularly stressful. Olivia had gotten into some completely wild debt. We were talking about an amount that could easily buy another small house like mine. She called me crying, but I was adamant. I had given her money before, which of course was never returned. I said, "No, Olivia. I won't jeopardize everything I have for your mistakes." My parents pressured me. My mother would come over, cry, and say that Olivia just isn't as strong as you are, Sarah. That we can't let her ruin her life. I replied that she had ruined it herself, and I was not her life raft. That was the first time we had such a harsh fight. I left, slammed the door, and didn't answer their calls for a week. For the first time in my life, I felt guilty for having something they didn't. And that was the backdrop. My house, my garden, my clear boundaries. On one side, my small, hard-earned fortress; on the other, the rising, sticky anger and resentment from the people closest to me. They didn't understand that I was protecting not just bricks and a mortgage, but myself. I knew. If I gave them this money, they would find somewhere else to mess up again. It happened in the middle of the month. I was driving home after an especially tough day at work. Heavy rain, wet asphalt, blinding headlights from an oncoming car. I only remember the sharp screech of tires and the impact. There was no time for fear, only for a moment of bewilderment. Then darkness. I came to in a hospital room. White ceiling, tubes, beeping machines. First there was a fog, then pain, then clarity. The nurse, whom I asked to bring my phone because I needed to call work, brought it, but something about her gaze was off. She didn't look happy about me waking up. She looked tense. "Sarah, you're going to be fine. You've had a difficult month," she said, avoiding my eyes. "A month?" I croaked. I didn't know exactly what she meant, but I felt like I had missed something bigger than just time. The first person I saw was my friend, David. He walked into the room with a bouquet, but the look on his face was as if he had come to a funeral, not to see a friend who had woken up. "Thank God, Sarah, you're awake." He sat down next to me, his voice trembling. "What happened, David?" "My parents." "Olivia? How are they?" I asked, expecting to see them any minute. They're fine. Physically," he replied. He fidgeted, looking away, and then looked at me with such unbearable pity that my insides plummeted. "Sarah, while you were in a coma, something happened. I didn't want to tell you right away, but you need to know. Your house." I expected him to say the house was flooded or something like that. Anything but what he said next. He took a deep breath. "Your parents sold your house. They used the power of attorney you signed so they could pay bills just in case. They used it to arrange an urgent sale. The money, it went to pay off Olivia's debt." I lay there, staring at the white ceiling, and the ringing in my ears was so loud that I couldn't hear my own breathing. It wasn't a blow, it was an amputation. Not of a finger, but of everything I had built. I wasn't fighting for my life on a hospital bed. I was simply providing my betrayers with the necessary time. They didn't pay my bills. They paid for my replacement. That was the most terrible realization. I don't have parents, I don't have a home. There is only a body they didn't manage to destroy, and a bill that I will present to them. And it will include much more than just the price of the house. The nurse, whose name tag read Brenda, finally slipped out, leaving me alone with David and the cold, hard truth vibrating in the air. David was still perched on the edge of the chair, looking like a deer caught in headlights, except I was the one holding the high beam lamp. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. The shock was too absolute for noise. It was a clean surgical removal of all my emotional responses, leaving behind only a cold, hard core of absolute focus. I had to know how. The power of attorney, I managed to say, my voice raspy like sandpaper scraping bone. I gave it to them 6 months ago when I had that minor surgery on my knee, remember? For emergencies. For my emergencies. David nodded slowly, rubbing his forehead. Yes, Sarah. I remember you saying it was just so they could sign off on something medical if you were under anesthetic. They had it notarized last week. Less than a week ago. The day after your accident, I think. The math clicked into place instantly. They didn't wait. The moment they knew I was incapacitated, truly incapacitated, not just having a sprain, they acted. My parents, Martha and Robert, who preached about honesty and hard work their entire lives, moved with the speed and precision of loan sharks. The system I trusted, the legal structure I relied on, had been weaponized against me while I was literally unconscious, my fate hanging by a thread. I focused on David. He was my anchor, the only one who knew the true nature of the dynamic between me and my family. Did they tell you why? Did they mention Olivia's name? Did they say where the money went? I kept my questions short, sharp. I needed facts, not feelings right now. David looked genuinely sick. They told the realtor it was an immediate cash sale to avoid massive inheritance tax issues, which is garbage because you weren't dead, Sarah. They told me when I went to the house asking if they needed help with the medical bills. They said you had sufficient assets and that this was necessary to save the family unit. They framed it as an act of love for all of us, Sarah. That Olivia was at a breaking point, and selling the asset was the only way to keep the family intact. The term family unit felt like a physical slap. My family unit meant they valued my sister's irresponsibility over my hard-won security. It meant my entire life's work was less valuable than one of Olivia's impulsive decisions. The sheer audacity of this performance, presenting this calculated betrayal as a noble sacrifice, made my stomach turn. I remembered the last argument I had with my mother. Her tears, her accusation that I was selfish for refusing to help. She wasn't crying over Olivia's situation. She was crying over the fact that her leverage over me was diminishing. This wasn't about need, it was about control. They needed to prove they still held the strings. For the next few days, while the physical recovery was slow and frustrating, nurses monitoring every breath, physical therapy sessions that felt like torture, my mind was operating at triple speed. I started piecing together the timeline, the signature on the POA, the quick transfer of funds, the immediate sale closing. They must have had the paperwork ready weeks ago, waiting for the perfect storm. And then the storm delivered them a miracle in the form of a drunk driver. I couldn't tell my parents I was awake yet. I needed time. Time to breathe, time to think, and most importantly, time to find the right kind of help. I couldn't just hire any lawyer. I needed someone vicious. Someone who understood the ugliness of family betrayal played out in a courtroom. I needed someone who wouldn't flinch when I told them my parents sold my home while I was brain dead. When David left that evening, promising to bring my laptop the next day, I stared at the ceiling again. I had always been the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who never caused trouble. That ended the moment the airbags deployed. Now, I was the aggrieved party in a case against the two people who taught me everything I thought I knew about loyalty. I was going to dismantle their carefully constructed reality piece by painful piece. I wasn't just fighting for my house back. I was fighting for the right to exist outside their manipulative shadow. The emotional toll was immense, but every sharp spike of pain in my healing body was just fuel for the fire I was about to light under them. They thought they saved the family. They only signed the divorce papers for the entire structure. The shock from David's revelation didn't stay as numbness. It crystallized into a cold, focused anger. Lying in that hospital bed, with the continuous beep of the monitors, I felt less like a patient recovering from a traumatic accident and more like a general planning a counterattack. I still hadn't told the medical staff that my mind was fully sharp, or that I knew about the house. I needed the quiet. I needed the isolation to work. David, bless his soul, was my secret weapon. He managed to sneak in my laptop and a burner phone. The hospital had confiscated my personal one. He'd already done the legwork, connecting me with a lawyer he called a shark. A brutal, no-nonsense litigation attorney named Andrew. Our first video call, conducted under a blanket in the dead of night, was the coldest conversation I've ever had. "Sarah, let's be clear," Andrew said, his face illuminated by the screen, his tone flat. "Your parents, Martha and Robert, committed fraud, possibly aggravated financial elder abuse by proxy, depending on the state of your mental capacity when you signed that POA. They exploited a legal mechanism for personal gain, namely your sister's debt. The house sale closed 7 days after your accident. It was a rapid-fire transaction. We can file an injunction to stop the new owners from taking possession and sue for fraudulent conveyance, but this is going to be brutal. They are your parents." I cut him off. "They are people who stole my life savings while I was fighting for my life. The relationship is over, Andrew. Just tell me what you need." The first thing I needed was to hear their voices. Not because I missed them, but to confirm the extent of their calculated performance. I had David text them from my phone, a simple, vague, "I'm awake but confused" message. The response was immediate. A rush of relieved texts from both of them, full of hollow prayers and declarations of love. The next day I made the call. My voice was intentionally weak, strained. "Mom? Dad?" I whispered. My mother, Martha, immediately started crying. The same theatrical, self-pitying tears she used when begging for Olivia. "Oh, my darling. Thank God. We've been praying every moment. You scared us to death, Sarah, you really did. The house, is everything okay? I had a dream it was raining inside." I pressed gently, giving them the perfect out, the chance to admit some small, manageable truth. My father, Robert, stepped in with a voice that was too loud, too steady. "Everything is fine, honey. Don't you worry about a thing. We are taking care of all your expenses, all the bills. Your house is secure. You just focus on getting better. We are dealing with everything so you don't have to stress." Taking care of all your expenses. The lie hung there, thick and suffocating. They weren't paying my hospital bills. They were justifying the theft. The fact that they could lie to me so smoothly, so easily, after what they had done, solidified my resolve. They believed they had outmaneuvered me. They believed their performance was convincing. That was their biggest mistake. I instructed Andrew to pull the full sale documents and the title transfer history. When he got back to me, the tension ramped up another notch. They hadn't just sold the house, they had fire-saled it. The purchase price was nearly 25% below the minimum appraised market value. A price so low it screamed distress sale or urgent liquidation. The buyer was a shell corporation that specialized in rapid property flips. My parents, in their panic to save Olivia from her debt deadline, hadn't waited for a decent offer. They had taken the first lowball cash offer just to get the money into Olivia's hands within the week. This wasn't just exploitation. It was gross financial negligence, carried out solely to protect my sister's poor choices. "The rush confirms intent, Sarah," Andrew stated. "They prioritize speed over your financial well-being. That helps our case. But we're running out of time. The final possession date is 2 weeks from today. We need to file the injunction now." But the true, gut-wrenching escalation came later that afternoon. David drove by my property to check on things, just a routine favor. He texted me a grainy photo. It wasn't a moving van yet, but it was worse. A large, expensive-looking pickup truck was parked in the driveway, and 2 men were outside, measuring the windows, ripping out the overgrown weeds in the garden I had just started tending. They were contractors. They weren't just waiting to move in, they were starting renovations. They were erasing my existence. Seeing that photo, a stranger's hand touching the soil I had dreamed of planting, broke through the cold anger. This was no longer a legal battle over a house. It was a race against time to stop the physical erasure of my independent life, conducted by the very people who created me. I typed a single message to Andrew: "File everything. Today. I want them to be served the papers before sundown." The conflict was no longer internal. It was external, aggressive, and about to blow up in the faces of my parents. The war for my life had officially begun, and I was going to fight it from my hospital bed. The injunction was filed. The world, which had seemed to move in slow motion while I was recovering, suddenly sped up to a dangerous velocity. Andrew warned me that serving my parents would trigger an explosion, but I needed it. I needed to see the mask drop. David was my messenger, my scout, because I couldn't risk the emotional shock of seeing them in person until the lawyers were ready. 2 days after the filing, David called, his voice tight. They got served, Sarah. They were at their bridge club. Martha started screaming immediately. Robert just went white and silent. They called you every name under the sun right there in public. That was the confirmation I needed. They had absolutely no defense based on righteousness or love. They only had panic. The preliminary hearing was set for the following week. We had managed to get a temporary restraining order preventing any further construction or sale finalization, freezing the property in legal limbo. The Shell Corporation buyer hired their own high-priced defense team, smelling blood in the water, which only validated Andrew's aggressive strategy. But the real turn, the moment where the stakes shifted from financial loss to absolute moral devastation, came from Olivia. She didn't call. She didn't send a lawyer. She showed up at the hospital. I was wearing street clothes, preparing for the deposition Andrew insisted I take near the courthouse, and suddenly, there she was, standing in the doorway of the private consultation room David had arranged for me. Olivia looked terrible, but not from guilt. She looked like she was running on fumes and entitlement. "You absolute monster, Sarah," she hissed, stepping inside and slamming the door shut behind her. She didn't approach my chair. She stood across the room, radiating pure, poisonous resentment. "You woke up just to destroy me? Just to watch me burn? Destroy you? I'm trying to stop my parents from stealing my property," I said, keeping my voice level, forcing the calm I didn't feel. "Stealing? You have no idea what it means to be me, Sarah. You sit there with your perfect little life, your perfect little house. Dad said you wouldn't help. You knew I was going to lose everything. You knew they were going to get in trouble with those loan sharks. You stood by and waited for an accident to happen so you could play the martyr and sue them when they were finally forced to choose." The accusation hit me with unexpected force. It wasn't the theft that broke my composure. It was the motive she ascribed to my silence before the accident. I waited. I leaned forward, the movement sending a dull ache through my ribs. I waited. "I said no to your loan a month ago, Olivia. I said no because you never pay anyone back. I protected my assets. And the accident, that was a drunk driver. What are you implying, Olivia? That I somehow orchestrated a crash to get my house back?" Her eyes narrowed, and that's when the crucial moral dilemma-inducing secret tumbled out, not as a confession, but as a furious justification. "You think I didn't know you were fighting them? You think I didn't see you building that wall? Dad told me you were refusing again. And guess what? When they came to me frantic talking about signing over POA to cover my immediate bailout money, I told them to use your house. I said, if Sarah won't help us now, she certainly won't miss it later when she's better. She has all that insurance money coming anyway. I pushed them, Sarah. I told them to do it fast before you could change your mind again. I told them you wouldn't even remember signing the document in the first place once you came out of it." The air rushed out of me. I hadn't just been a victim of their greed. I had been the intended target of a calculated financial hit, instigated by my sister. The accident hadn't given them an opportunity. It had given them the perfect cover for a crime they were already planning, and my sister had given them the final push. I was not only betrayed by my parents but was collateral damage in my sister's lifelong entitlement scheme. The moral line wasn't just crossed, it was obliterated. I was no longer just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my very identity against people who believed my misfortune was an invitation to plunder. Olivia's words echoed in the small, sterile room, not with the force of a confession, but with the casual cruelty of stating the obvious. I pushed them. She believed her desperation gave her carte blanche to dismantle my life, and worse, she believed I was too passive, too predictable to fight back effectively. She thought the coma was my permanent surrender. That was the moment the last vestiges of my sisterly affection, my familial loyalty evaporated. There was nothing left of the person who loved her, only the scorched earth where that person used to be. Get out, I managed, the voice remarkably steady, devoid of all the emotion she craved. She scoffed, turning toward the door. Fine. Enjoy your legal battles, Sarah. It won't bring back your precious house, and when this is over, don't expect a card on your birthday. You chose money over family. No, Olivia, I said, my voice gaining strength, startling her just as her hand touched the doorknob. You chose your debt over my reality, and you lose. Both of you. That day marked the final separation. Andrew moved with terrifying speed. The deposition went flawlessly. I laid out the timeline, the POA, the immediate sale post-accident, and then crucially, I brought in Olivia's explicit admission. David, having anticipated this, had placed a discreet audio recorder in the room, something Andrew cleared with the court immediately. Hearing the daughter push the parents to commit fraud against the comatose sibling, turned the tables from a messy civil suit into a clear case of predatory financial conspiracy. The courtroom was a war zone for 3 agonizing days. My parents sat rigid, pale specters of the people who raised me. Martha wept continuously, but they were tears of fear now, not self-pity. Robert kept staring at the floor, the silent acknowledgement of his failure written across his face. They were beaten, not by my cleverness, but by their own greedy haste. The ruling came down swiftly. The sale was voided due to fraudulent conveyance executed under duress and exploitation of incapacity. The property was restored to my name, pending full damages repayment. Andrew pursued punitive damages that would effectively strip both parents and Olivia of significant assets, making them financially reliant, just as they had made me. They didn't just lose the house. They lost everything they used to leverage their control over me. The final blow wasn't the judgment, it was the aftermath. I was discharged from the hospital a week later, physically healed enough to move, emotionally raw but undeniably free. I never went back to the old house. It felt tainted, a monument to betrayal. I sold it quickly to a genuine family, using the proceeds to buy a place much further away, near the coast, where the horizon felt infinite. I sent my parents one final, brief letter delivered by courier, not Andrew. It contained no accusations, no anger, only a single detached statement. I wish you well in rebuilding what you have broken. They called, of course. Martha's voice, broken and small, asked if we could just talk. I listened to the static on the line for a full minute, picturing the pristine white ceiling above me in the ICU, picturing the empty space where my future used to be. Then I gently hung up. I did not need to scream or seek vengeance. The system had confirmed the truth. Their actions had consequences that outweighed any perceived familial obligation. As I stood on the beach of my new quiet town, the salt air scrubbing my lungs clean, I realized the true resolution wasn't getting the house back. It was the sudden terrifying clarity of knowing exactly who I was and who they were. I was the one who fought back from a point of no return. They were the ones who traded my life for a debt. The ultimate question that lingered as the tide pulled back, revealing the wet, shifting sand, was this. Can you ever truly rebuild a foundation that was never solid to begin with? Or is the best course of action simply to walk away from the ruins and start building somewhere the ground doesn't shift beneath your feet? I still don't know the answer, but for the first time in my life, I am the one holding the blueprint.